Blessings, everybody. Sending you a big, giant hug, and what a powerful day this is. It's the day for Our Lady, Mary Magdalene, and everything that she stood for, everything she still stands for. And before I kind of get into, talking about my relationship to her and my story with her, and also kind of what she and the Magdalene consciousness can mean for the masculine, I just want to say it only took 2,000 years to have a day like today. I mean, it was just really beautiful to know that, after this amazing 2,000 year span of time, what I feel is really amazing and really beautiful is that the knowledge, the wisdom, the true identity of Mary Magdalene is starting to come back. It's starting to come back into mainstream consciousness. And it's not that I would ever claim to know the truth of who she is and, her 100% accurate account and story. But I think what I love most about this day kind of taking place is that the narrative we've been given for so long about Mary Magdalene, the one that kind of has been propagated by the church, the one that's been passed down generation after generation, is, in my opinion, not the true story. It's not an accurate account of who she was as a woman and also who she was as a divine consort and partner of Yeshua, of Jesus. And I think that's one of the most heartwarming parts of today, the part that I feel so excited about. And so you could say, feeling like the true resurrection of who she was is coming back is because we're starting to see maybe there was more to her and her story than we've been told. Maybe there's more to the life that she lived and the role that she played in the unfolding saga of the Christ than we've been, in a mainstream way taught. So the fact that she's being honored today, the fact that she's being given praise to this level is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's, to me, signifying and signaling a turning point in the way the divine feminine, of course, is coming back into a very mainstream, truly empowered, truly embodied way. But just the stories of the feminine figures throughout time, especially Mary Magdalene, are now starting to be talked about in a way that I feel is far more accurate. So way to go, humanity. It only took 2,000 years, but what a beautiful thing and what a beautiful turnaround that we're experiencing now, seeing that the Magdalene consciousness and the story of Mary Magdalene is starting to come back, and it warms my heart so, so, so much. So yeah, my story with Mary Magdalene. And it's interesting because where she came from is in some ways a mystery to me, because I didn't grow up religious. I didn't grow up connected to Christianity or any type of religion. So the figure of Mary Magdalene was something that, how do I say, just wasn't in my consciousness. It wasn't in my field in any way, shape, or form. And so when she started appearing to me and coming into my consciousness, it was really almost like this completely unknown figure, in many ways a very kind of like innocent figure to come into my reality. And it all started shifting when I turned 25. When I turned 25 is when she actually started to make an appearance in my life. And at that age, I was going through a massive transformation. I was going through a massive shift in my life, or should I say more specifically in my heart, because what I've done and what has been a pattern in my life is I tend to make some really big leaps. I tend to make some really big growth spurts in my evolution, in my consciousness, in my being. And the problem with that for me is that when I would make these big shifts, when I would make these big leaps, you could say, in consciousness, what was happening is I was just going kind of like straight toward the light without really addressing the kind of the ground floor levels, the fundamental parts of who we are that hold our being and our essence together. And so I was making these big leaps in awareness, these big leaps in spiritual understandings, but I wasn't exactly at that time really taking care of my heart. I really wasn't taking care of my inner child. So when I was 25, I had this really powerful ceremony where Mary Magdalene actually came to me. And what's beautiful is I feel like it's like Jesus, Brother Yeshua. It's like he appears to anyone and everyone who calls on him. But what I feel like with Mary Magdalene is she kind of waits for that call. She kind of waits for that opening so that she can show up in your life in a way that she'll actually be received. And during this ceremony, I finally kind of tapped into the fact that I wasn't truly addressing my heart on this spiritual evolution. It was like really about the third eye and the crown and how much I could expand into these higher states. But I wasn't exactly addressing my heart. and more specifically, I wasn't really addressing past pains and traumas that had, accrued in my life. And so during this ceremony, as I started to tap into that, that's when Mary Magdalene actually started appearing to me. And when she appeared to me, it was like the way she described it, or the way she shared with me, was just that she felt that my heart, in many ways, was like a homing beacon. It was sending out this light of intention that I was ready to do some really profound and deep work, deep dives and deep digging and deep transformation. So she came to me and she asked me, she's like, I could feel the shifts that you're getting ready to go through. And I could feel the space in your heart that we're ready to call in these shifts. And if you want, I will be here as a guiding light for this transformation in your life. But you have to be sure, because this will be the most painful and the most difficult time in your life, if this is what you want. So what I felt from this, what I received from her transmission of coming into my life at the time, is she was giving me this opportunity to actually to see myself honestly. She was giving me this opportunity to actually connect to myself in a really authentic and true way. But the problem with that is I was no longer allowed to hide. I was no longer allowed to bypass. I was no longer allowed to skip past maybe some fundamental parts of my growth. So she was giving me this beautiful opportunity. She was holding this space within my heart where I could actually start to do that work. But I needed to be sure, because this would be literally, the way she described it, like standing in fire willingly. And when we stand in the fire willingly of our own growth, our own transformation, it scorches us, it fries us, it cooks us. And it's so rarely a beautiful or an enjoyable thing. Of course it's beautiful, yes, but it's very rarely a pleasurable or easy thing to do. And so her coming into my life at that point when I turned 25 really was signaling a big shift, where I was starting to see why it's important for people on this spiritual path to start doing the deep inner work, the shadow work, the underworld work, the work in which we have to go into our heart. It can't just be about the glamour of spirituality and ascension and all that good stuff. That, of course, is a part of awakening. But it was so important that we also stay balanced and we stay whole by doing the deep inner work. And that's when she started coming into my life. And so for the next 2 years, she became literally like a guiding principle or guiding force, which I would talk to her and connect with her and feel her on a daily basis. She'd be directing me to do this, to see this, to research this, to call this into my life, to experience this. Some of my most important relationships, since I turned 25 have been literally orchestrated, in my opinion, by Mary Magdalene, making sure I connect with the people that really I needed to connect with. The places that I traveled around the world had so much to do with who she was and what I was trying to receive from her wisdom and her lineage. So I spent, not only a solid 2 years after I turned 25, but up until this day, literally kind of recalling the connection within my own heart, overlit by the Magdalene consciousness, by Mary Magdalene herself. And for her to come into my life and to help guide me through these is something that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. And I hope she appears to me for the rest of my life. I hope she keeps working with me for the rest of my life. And so on a day like today, it just gives me an extra reason just to say thank you. Thank you to her, and thank you to all the emanations of her, all the embodiments of her that have come and passed. All the people who connect with her consciousness, and all the people who in some ways embody the Magdalene consciousness who have showed up in my life. I'm just so grateful for this journey that we've been going on, for this experience that we've been going on, and for everything that she represents. Not that I could even, I'm barely scratching at the surface of who she really was and what she represents, but so far what I've found has been life-altering and life-changing. And I really hope that those of us who feel called to connect with her continue to connect with her, and maybe the people that need to connect with her but don't realize it yet get the opportunity to connect with her consciousness and to feel, the energy and the love that she carries. And why I feel so honored and grateful is because I think for most people, they think that the Magdalene consciousness or the Magdalene energy, of course, not that I have any idea necessarily what is and isn't, with Mary Magdalene, but, what I've felt and what I've experienced and received so far is that it feels like traditionally a lot of people think Mary Magdalene is just this feminine archetype that's here to work with and connect with women and the collective feminine of the planet. And with me, it's been so powerful and beautiful is because I actually got to experience her and her energy as a man, as a masculine, and to see what that type of wisdom and what that type of energy can do and cause and catalyze for my transformation as I would go through it. And not only that, it felt like I've had so many lifetimes, whether I was a priestess or whether I was a woman or whether I worked with this type of collective Magdalene consciousness in the past. But now is a lifetime where I actually get to walk as a man and to start embodying these principles, to start embodying, what she stood for, what she taught, and what the wisdom of the Magdalene truly was, in my opinion. And so some areas that have really impacted me and that have really helped me, especially as a man, is first and foremost is understanding integrity. And integrity is something that I've struggled with for a long time in my life, and I still struggle with it. One, because I'm not quite sure I even understand what integrity means for me. We could get a definition of it from a dictionary and all that, but I feel, when we connect with the idea of integrity, when we connect with the idea of what is our personal integrity, it's a journey first to discover what that is. And I feel like I've lived so much of my life out of integrity. And, I could create excuse for this, excuse for this, excuse for this, for why I've spent so much of my life, living out of integrity. But the fact is that's the case up until, very recently when I'm really starting to shine more light into an integrity. But when Mary Magdalene appeared in my life, at this very critical stage in my life, I in many ways was so lost in my own pain, in my own darkness, in my own shadow, that it made living from a place of integrity really difficult. So she kind of came in and really started holding the flashlight up to me, really started to shine the light into me to see, where in my life I was significantly out of integrity and start working on those areas. And then once those areas were starting to come into alignment, then I could start to branch out and clean up the other areas that maybe weren't as pressing. And so for me, starting to live in integrity had some pretty key and core areas. And one of the biggest ones was in the ways that I connected to the feminine. So she really helped me start the process of understanding that it's going to be so key in my life to connect with the feminine in ways that are integrous, in ways that are fully aligned, fully authentic, and fully with integrity. And the first step of that she did, it was she really made me see myself honestly and take account and take responsibility for so many of the ways that had been out of integrity with women in the past. Because that's honestly where it starts. It honestly starts with honesty. So it was a really painful and challenging thing for me to have to be held accountable for maybe a lot of the ways that I had treated women in the past, to be held accountable for the ways that I had dishonored the feminine in the past. And for me, just to have to stomach that and to be okay with that, to be like, wow, I thought I was a good guy, but I wasn't in many ways, especially when it came to connections with the feminine. So the way Mary Magdalene started kind of molding and alchemicalizing a lot of these things, she's like, you first just have to see where you are and see what you've done. See where you came from and the man that you've been up until that point, because until you can see that clearly, you're not going to be able to start shifting, you're not going to be able to start changing. So I had to go through this process of really starting to forge in me a new definition of integrity and a desire to live a far more integrous life, which she came in at that time when I was really starting to set that intention. And so to go through and start to feel, the ways that I needed to shift my relationship to women with much more integrity, she stood as this beautiful feminine figure, holding me accountable, holding me over the fire, and really giving me the encouragement I needed. Really starting to give me the encouragement and holding that beautiful space of unconditional love for me to make these shifts in my life. And I'm still nowhere close to being in a master of integrity. But I will say that, that's one of the biggest things that she's given me is the desire to live a far more integrous life when it comes to the feminine, because she represents so much of the collective feminine. But she also gave me a lot of tools and a lot of pathways and really held a lot of space for me to start to transmute these patterns that I've had with women in the past. And it shifted so many things, it shifted so many things, it catalyzed so many things for me. And in that process, it felt like she taught me a lot about women. She taught me a lot about women first by kind of activating the principle of understanding I have an inner feminine. because I think for a lot of us, we don't realize we have the polar opposite gender embodied within us, especially for men. I think it's the last thing that a lot of us really considers, that we have an inner feminine, and it needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be loved and taken care of. And so she, really started helping me form a connection with myself and my own inner feminine, while at the same time kind of helping me understand women and the infinite mysteries that you are, dear sisters out there. And it's not like I have any idea still of how to understand you women, but she definitely started helping me create new ways of understanding the feminine energy. And it was through her that I was able to start understand what womb consciousness was, and the incredible power that you women hold as womb consciousness, and what the womb consciousness really represents, and how to love and honor womb consciousness, and to honor the feminine heart, and to honor the feminine inner child, and to honor the ways that the feminine wants to express herself. And so during this process of connecting with Mary Magdalene, it was really beautiful, because she gave me these, you could say, these initiations into ways that I can show up into the true energy of the feminine. And one of the ways I think men get tested the most in relationships, and men get tested the most in connection with women, is it's easy to hold space for women when things are easy and gentle and graceful and peaceful, but it's like we get tested at certain times that shows our capacity as men to hold space for our partners. And I think one of the biggest challenges and gateways and opportunities for partnerships to grow is for men to learn how to cultivate our ability to hold space for the feminine rage. And this was a really difficult thing for me to do, because many times when women would be in their rage body around me, whether it was specifically about me or not, what it was doing is it was kind of catalyzing my own guilt and my own shame and my own regret about the ways that I've kind of dishonored or hurt the feminine. And so when the rage would come to me, would trigger all these different things within me, which would cause me to shut down, or to feel like I was being blamed, or to blame right back, like all these things. So she really helped me step into first, like, the accountability for me as a man, which then led to my ability to hold space for the feminine rage, which also allows you as men, me as men, to hold space for the wild feminine, or the dark feminine, all these different aspects of the feminine, which in many ways has been shut down and repressed for so long. And in many ways, women don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing these aspects of themselves in truly full power states, because it terrifies men, which it does terrify men. She really started helping me stretch my heart's capacity to hold space for the feminine. And again, what I love about this initiation that I went through with Mary Magdalene, and still I'm going through with Mary Magdalene, is it's always tied back to me and the spaces within my own field, my own heart, and really my own feminine, that carried these emotional qualities, that carried these emotional energies. And yeah, it was a big thing to have to get in touch with my own inner feminine's anger, and my own inner feminine's rage, and my own inner feminine's shadow and darkness and free flowing Shakti. It just, I feel like so many parts of the feminine are still shut down, but they're waking up now. And it was really beautiful for me to go through that process of waking up my own self, and waking up into my own inner feminine, and waking up to all these feminine aspects that were held in myself, which then again gets translated in my ability to stretch and open up and hold space for the feminine in ways that I think women really want to be held by men in those ways. And it was difficult. It was so difficult. And again, I really appreciate it, when Mary Magdalene kind of started appearing to me, and she's like, "Are you sure you want to go on this journey with me? Because it's going to be the most difficult and painful processes." It was like I had to account for so many areas of my life that I didn't want to account for, and I had to start stretching myself in ways that were significantly uncomfortable, and to own things that I didn't necessarily want to own. And as that started to evolve more and more, it allowed me to see how I was connecting to the feminine, and from what places I was connecting to the feminine from. And again, like I spoke, a few minutes ago about womb consciousness, but yeah, it was an interesting thing to have to start tapping into, and start understanding, and stepping forward to understand what womb consciousness is. Again, I think it's a lot of women still don't know what womb consciousness is, but I think for men it's even more incredible that there is something as magical as a womb, and for us we have no idea what it means. So she started teaching me a lot about what the womb is, and what it means archetypally, and what it can mean energetically, and especially as a man, how it wants to be honored and loved and seen and held. And yeah, through that process, that's when Mary Magdalene started initiating me, and helping me understand blood rituals, and rituals in which women get to have a relationship with your body through your menstruation, through your menstrual cycles, and how magical and powerful of a time that is when you have a relationship with your blood and with your bleeding, what it can mean for you. Again, this is me humbly speaking as a man, not that I'd have any idea, what it's like as a woman to have your moon time, to have your menstruation. But what she was teaching me was that it was a beautiful opportunity and a beautiful way in which women would connect with their bodies if they want. And that being said, it was a wonderful opportunity for men also to create these new relationships with the feminine around moon time, around menstruation, how we as men can actually show up for a woman during this time. And not just show up, but even how we could potentially be a part of this magic. We can be a part of this cycle with you as women, and how we can make that magic into a ritual that we do together as a relationship, as a union between the masculine and the feminine. So she was starting to teach me about womb consciousness through all the different elements that would come through the feminine womb. And then on top of that, you get into the idea of like sacred lovemaking, and what it takes as a man to become truly deserving of entry into a woman's womb space. And at the time, in much, not much younger, even sometimes still in very recent times, just the ways, if you're out of integrity, you can actually do a lot of harm to a woman when you make love to her, if you're embodying that lack of integrity. So one of the things that Mary Magdalene would speak about, and teach me about, is that whatever consciousness and frequency and vibration a man carries when he penetrates and enters into a woman, that energy is actually imparted into a woman's womb space. So it's really important. One, again, don't let me tell you anything about being a woman, being a woman, like, so just take this as just sharing. But how important it is for women to really be discerning and honoring of their womb temple, to not receive a man who's not worthy of that. But she would teach me a lot about what it takes to actually become worthy, of of yeah, having the permission to have presence within a woman's womb, especially when it comes to making love. And so there's this big awakening in me of the sensitivity that I required when I would make love, to make sure that when I would be entering into a woman's, holy of holies, her womb space, is that I'm carrying with me intentions of love, integrity, of authenticity, and so that the imprint that gets left after me is one that is positive. And I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to move through that energy to make sure that when I connect with a woman, I'm not leaving a mess. I'm not leaving pain, trauma, anything like that. And I hope one day I get that down. I'm still fumbling through the dark with that one. But it was beautiful to have Mary Magdalene's teachings teach me how to start to first just be sensitive and aware of a woman's consciousness, especially as it relates to her womb and sacred lovemaking and menstruation and her moon time. And also it gets me into touch with my own womb space. Again, because men, we have, just as you women have etheric lingams, men, we have etheric wombs. And to get me in touch with my own womb space. And when I first started connecting with womb consciousness and womb energy, as Mary Magdalene was bringing me through, it was terrifying, because the womb to me feels like this infinite void, this place without boundaries, this place that is so dark. It's a void of darkness like you can't even imagine. And of course, I don't mean darkness in any way scary or negative or evil. I'm talking about the primordial space in which creation arises from. And so as she would bring me through these initiations of bringing me into contact with womb consciousness, it was terrifying. It's like being in deep water. water and not being able to see the bottom, you just feel very uncomfortable and you feel very insecure. And so as I would get in touch with these places of infinite and vast expanse within womb consciousness, I had to learn to be comfortable in this boundaryless, formless void, which I think is the complete polar opposite of the masculine archetype and masculine energy, which likes structures and boundaries and things. To be fully immersed in the void and womb consciousness. Yeah, it took me a while to learn how to be comfortable with that. And it also taught me a lot when I make love to a woman, that, it's such a difference between like sex and fucking, lovemaking, but also lovemaking to the womb and to the void. And I think so many men, myself included, it's terrifying to make love and connect with a woman's womb consciousness because it is so vast and because it's so infinite. It makes us so uncomfortable that we just fuck. We just want to fuck and keep it surface level and not dissolve, because the true price or the ticket or the cost of entry into womb consciousness, as taught to me by Mary Magdalene, is complete annihilation for the man. It's like we have to be ready to surrender it all and give ourselves over completely for us to be received by the void that is the womb. And yeah, that took me a long time just to get comfortable with that idea, let alone to put that into practice. So I think that's one of the big teachings that I got from Mary Magdalene throughout these initiations, is understanding womb consciousness, understanding my connection as I tap into the feminine through the womb portal, and what that takes for me as a man to step up to the plate and really become worthy and deserving of that experience. So that was huge for me. That was such a huge part of my expansion and stretching that came through the Magdalene consciousness. And yeah, it was interesting as I tuned in to hear, all the stories of how Mary Magdalene held space for Yeshua's crucifixion, and she was there for his resurrection. And I believe that. I fully believe that. And of course, there's lots of different stories and lots of different accounts how it happened. But for me, what I love most about Mary Magdalene is her infinite strength and faith. That's what it felt like. And it wasn't that she was born with it. It wasn't that she just had it. She earned it. She earned it through her initiations and activations and life stories, whatever those might be. That's what I feel. And so when I imagine her witnessing Yeshua's crucifixion and her being there and holding space for his resurrection and his coming back to the world, to me feels so potent and important for what's going on in today's world. Because I can say as a man, I've done so many things that were wrong to the feminine. And I've done so many things that I shouldn't have done. Again, I could give X, Y, and Z excuses why I did it, but I shouldn't. And I'm sorry for that. And what I love about feeling Mary Magdalene's presence and her infinite strength and her faith is that, to me, Magdalene and Yeshua, Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, represent in many ways the collective masculine and the feminine. Is that there's a lot of anger and rage that the feminine feels to the masculine right now, and completely justifiably so, for all the ways that we've misstepped and mistreated you and not honored you and acted out of integrity. And in many ways, we're starting to be crucified. But it's not a crucifixion in the way that I feel like you women are nailing us up there and crucifying and punishing us, even though I feel like it is happening, and there are some women who are actively wanting to inflict pain and suffering on the masculine because they're in pain and because they've been hurt. What I feel like is happening is that men are starting to step up, and men are starting to actually crucify themselves, in the sense that we are offering accountability for our sins, and we're offering to hold ourselves responsible and accountable for the ways we've acted out of integrity, and literally allowing our truth and our admission and our honesty and our holding ourselves accountable as an offering to show the world that men are now ready to hold this energy and we're ready to change. And it's like Mary Magdalene, when she would witness Yeshua being crucified, I feel like so many women now are starting to embody the Magdalene consciousness on the planet and are fiercely holding divine and loving space, witnessing the men starting to step up. Because I'm sure Mary Magdalene could have been so mad and angry at all the people that were crucifying her beloved, but she stood strong in her heart, in her faith, inner understanding of what was happening, witnessing and loving him through it. And so many women now are starting to hold that field for men who are starting to account for this and starting to own their shit and starting to own their shadow and starting to apologize. And then as we go through the resurrection, as we go through the process of us self-crucifying and offering that crucifixion as an example to the world, then as Mary Magdalene received Yeshua when he was resurrected, I feel like the collective feminine, especially the women who are embodying a lot of these Magdalene principles, are starting to hold that space for men now to become resurrected. And for you to be there to receive us. And not in a place of anger, not in a place of fucking pissed off, you're going to scream at us and you're going to make sure we feel pain. You're letting us crucify and be resurrected and holding that loving space for us, because that's what we need right now. It's not going to serve ultimately anything if the collective feminine is just trying to bash the masculine and be mad at us forever. What we need is that space where you're not going to tolerate any more shit. Let's get that clear. Don't tolerate any more shit from us. Make sure it doesn't happen again, but you're holding that space of love because you can see the transformation that's taking place in the masculine. The crucifixion process that the masculine is going through right now, willingly. We're willingly doing it. And then you'll be there in that loving field to receive us on the other side. As we rise and we exit the cave of our own internal alchemicalization and transformation, as we resurrect ourselves in that beautiful cave, and as we come out, you're there waiting for us. And for our internal love and gratitude will be there because you were waiting there for us, and you saw us, and you held that space for us. The infinite patience and the infinite grace and the unconditional love that you held for us as we go through this process of coming into our true selves, as we go from our, lower self, primal masculine, into our crucified self, the transformation and the resurrection into our more divine form. And for that, I'm so grateful for the feminine. And I see that as many ways in which that's how the Magdalene consciousness is starting to express itself. And it's starting to be felt by women, and it's starting to be felt by the masculine. And that's another big area that Mary Magdalene helped me grow from, is because she saw in me my need to continuously die to be reborn, and my need to keep diving into the underworld and into the shadow in which I had to be reborn again and again and again. Because it's not a one-stop shop. It's not a one-step. Maybe for some people it is. For me, it's like continuous layers, continuous needed deaths and crucifixions so I can keep resurrecting better. But it's this beautiful process where I'm going through. I keep discovering new layers of myself, and then I surrender into those layers, whether they're pain, suffering, trauma, and I go into them and I feel them. And I let those parts of myself die and transform and shift so I can be resurrected again. And then the process starts over and over. And so I'm really feeling, one, the need for men to do that shadow work, to keep crucifying and being resurrected, to go into the underworld and to emerge again. But the need for women to also see that we need you. We need your help in this, and we need you to hold us in compassion, because the more you blame and the more you yell at us and the more you get angry at us, it's ultimately not going to help us shift. And again, I'm not saying you should do nothing. Certainly don't tolerate anything more, but there's a lot of power when it comes to the masculine shifting, when we know we are safe with the feminine. And the feminine's not going to go turn her back on us or betray us or abandon us. Again, these are all mother wounds that come up, but there's a powerful energy when women can be strong enough to hold these shifts that the men are going through. And that's why I love Mary Magdalene, because she was so strong. And the way she was able to hold Yeshua through all of his trials and all of his transformations and ultimately his resurrection, it just gives me so much hope. And it brings my heart so much peace to know that the feminine is starting to hold the masculine in that way, and to see the masculine in that way, and to help the masculine rise up. And the more men that go through this process, but also start to connect with their own inner feminine, this process is then going to be accelerated, because the more, as I call them, the men of the Magdalene, the more men of the Magdalene there are, the more that example will be shown to the world, and the more other men will get to see what it's like for the masculine to step into these vulnerable places, for the masculine to step into these difficult places within inside ourselves, within inside our own transformation. And so I really feel like the masculine is being wrapped and held by the Magdalene Oversoul right now. And in 2,000 years, the second coming, as we've all heard about in scripture before, I feel like the second coming in many ways is about the resurrection and the reuniting of the divine feminine in her true form, but for that to merge with the divine masculine, so that the second coming is when the true polarities of the masculine and feminine, the Christ, the Yeshua, is then merged, and the story can be retold and rewoven, and the partnership can begin, the true partnership. And again, that happens within inside us, between our own masculine and feminine, if we do the dive and do the work to get in there. Yeah. So this is a powerful day. This is a powerful day for a lot of these examples and opportunities to rise within our consciousness. And at the very least, it's a day in which we can all take a moment and close our eyes and honor a woman who represented so much, whether Mary Magdalene existed or not, and I believe she did. But even if we just want to keep it in the state and in the awareness of maybe she just archetypally represents something, then good. Let her archetypally represent something if you don't want to believe she was real. And then tune in with what she archetypally represents and fucking work with it. and feel what that can represent for your life. And for us to give our deep and heartfelt gratitude for who and what she was. And for me, who she continues to be. And me just conjuring her into my heart makes me a better man. And me just connecting with her makes me a better person. And I really hope, if and when she calls to you, whether you have a relationship to her or not, is that you go on this journey with her. Because I feel like she is so ready to assist humanity right now, and she's very ready to assist women as she's always been, but I see her now opening up more and more to being ready to assist and to help the masculine, as she also did, as she was an activator and an anointer and a teacher to the men that would receive her and have the capacity to receive her. And so that feels like it's such a big process, and it's something that makes me so happy to know that these energies, even if they are just archetypal energies, they're starting to shift and come into the masculine. And on top of that, just get to celebrate in the stories of Mary Magdalene, because all the stories are starting to come back. I feel like as our consciousness is opening more and more, is that our frequencies are becoming ready to receive more and more of who and what she was. And one of my favorite parts is all the stories and the memories of who she was are starting to surface again. Whether it's because we're learning to translate Aramaic better, or it's because we're digging in and we're starting to channel our own stories into our hearts, which for me is what I like to do. And I think a lot of us are doing that. Yeah. So that's in many ways a lot of what Mary Magdalene represents to me. There's so much more. I mean, how can I share in a linear way, all that she's done for me and all the things that she's created in my life? But those were some of the big key areas that I feel like she really showed up for me and really transformed me in my own field, but also the way that I connect and interact with the feminine. And of course that all comes from the way that I interact and connect with my own inner feminine and the ever unfolding process that it is. And what's beautiful too, some of you might know I'm doing a 6-month celibacy pact with myself. So just one to see if I can do it, because I don't know if I can, but really it's about creating another one of those deep dives into myself so I could further go in and clear out traumas and pains and patterns and behavior patterns that I have as it relates to the feminine, and to keep going in and clearing those, so that as I move forward in life, that those patterns aren't there, and so many of them are locked in our pain bodies and in our shadows and in our underworld. And I know Mary Magdalene is there for those of us that want to dive into those painful places. And you can call on her strength, and you can call on her light and her grace and her unconditional love to be there. And especially for men who might be watching this, when we're going in and we have to take responsibility and own, our shit and the things maybe that we acted out of integrity with, there's such a fear that the feminine will chop our heads off in a very Kali-like way. And we probably deserve it. But there's really potent and powerful magic when the masculine can start to own and take responsibility for all the ways that we fucked up, all the ways that we've hurt women, all the ways that we've hurt ourselves in some ways, and to know that that can be received by the feminine in this unconditionally loving space. Because when it does get received, when the masculine and our shame and our guilt and our anger and all these things, when they do get received from a genuine place within inside us, when it gets received by the feminine, there's this beautiful alchemy that happens. And also we learn to trust the feminine again. We learn, because a lot of the rise of the patriarchy came from the masculine not trusting the feminine anymore. And that trust is now starting to be rewoven, because men are stepping up and doing the work so that we show we can be trusted, which we still can't be in a lot of ways, but we're working on it. So just bear with us. And also the feminine is starting to hold this fierce but also compassionately strong space for the masculine, so that we can bear our sins and we can bear our regrets and our shames and our anger, and that the feminine will now start to hold us in love, in compassion. And when that happens, the trust is then restored, the trust is then resurrected, and the masculine can feel safe to start doing more and more of this work. So it's so key for any of you women out there watching. Not that I will tell you what to do ever, but I think it's so important for women to see there's such power in loving the masculine in a very therapeutic, compassionate, unconditional way. Because when we finally get this gunk out, when we finally get our shames and our guilts out, and it creates then the space for true shift and transformation to happen. And it's happened for me, and I'm so grateful for all the women that have been able to hold me in this unconditional space. And I've had so many experiences of partners in the past and for women in the past when I go into these vulnerable states and I'm trying to explore parts of myself that I've never explored before. It always comes back, and they get triggered, they get angry, they vent their rage back on me, which again, I probably deserve all of it. And for the women out there that have been able to hold that space and have seen the transformation that I'm going on and the things that I'm moving and shifting with inside myself, which are not easy. The ones that have done it in this beautiful, unconditionally loving way, even if they didn't do it perfectly, but if I could feel, them being there for me and supporting me, thank you, because it meant more than I could possibly express. And it's such a beautiful guiding light and principle to feel the feminine there starting to hold the masculine in such a beautiful, strong way. So I really hope women out there, you can also call on the strength of Mary Magdalene and her infinite capacity and grace to hold these type of fierce spaces for the masculine, because we men, we need it, even if we don't know how to ask for it, even if we're scared or shy or embarrassed to ask that we need help, that we want to be held and loved by the feminine while we work our shit out. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for helping us step through these portals. And thank you to Mary Magdalene, who's helped me immensely and infinitely in my own stepping through these difficult portals for myself. And then through the masculine, the Christ consciousness can truly rise. And through the women, the Magdalene consciousness can truly rise. And then it swaps, because we have both. So I could probably talk forever about this. I feel like I'm going to do some more. One of the things that I'm really excited to launch, start next month, is one of the things I'm most passionate about is that I love stories, and I love Gnostic and Essene-based stories. So I think there are so many powerful stories that I've come across, not just about Mary Magdalene, but about Yeshua, about Joseph of Arimathea, about all of the Essenes, that I feel like really hold some powerful codes and magic that I think people need to hear. So I'm going to start telling these lost stories. I'm going to start a channel, the lost stories of the Essenes, and I really want to start sharing more about who I think these people were. Not that I know who they really were, but it's just who I feel they were and the stories that I've encountered so far. And I'm really excited to yeah, share these stories, and especially to share more of the stories about Mary Magdalene that I truly love and hold very dear to my heart, that have helped me shift and grow in so many ways, and I can't wait to share them with all of you. Um, Accounts of her life and her deeds and her works. So I love you guys. I hope everyone's having a beautiful, yeah, Mary Magdalene feast and Ascension Day. And yeah, if you can, just whether you know what you're doing or not, or have any idea what it's about, spend some time and take some time today, even if it's just a few moments to close your eyes and to connect with the consciousness of Mary Magdalene, to be in gratitude for who she was, even if you don't know who she was. You'll feel her. To allow that presence to come into your heart, maybe even make an altar, get some flowers, take that time to dive and to jump in. It's beautiful. And I think more people should. Not that you should do anything, my apologies, but I feel like if people would open themselves up to some of these type of teachings and consciousness, the world would be such a better place. Such a better place. Yeah. Well, yeah, if anyone wants to talk more about Mary Magdalene, whether it's any women or men, always excited to share more, talk more. So feel free to leave a comment on this video or just send me a message. And yeah, really excited to bring more of my understanding of her out there and to see how it can ripple out and change the world, or at least change some people's experiences. Love you guys. Get some dinner. Pretty hungry. It's a feast day after all. Love you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon.